position we have MCKK 1. You notice that this is going to be large, so you might want to control any meters which might be inappropriate. Either way, without any further ado, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to speak for the motion that stands in the name. Here. Congratulations, congratulations.
Ladies and gentlemen, and my YouTube friends, for all the reasons why you hate the government, we believe that altering the history textbooks is one of the things that the government actually did right. But before we tell you that the action of altering history textbooks is a norm. It's not just debated. It's a norm action taken by countries all over the world. And we believe that there are certain odds of behavior that are immoral, but this can be clarified later on. And then second, when we talk about this rights to information, we tell you that in our paradigm, the students still have the rights to research out of their classrooms, still have the ability to get that information later on. So where will we have this debate? We believe that we will take this debate nearer to home, nearer to our hearts. Therefore, the primary set today by the government side is in Malaysia. The stance taken by our side is that we would protect nationalism through three substantives. I'm going to talk about why history textbooks and how the importance of nationalism, while my second speaker will be talking about how it will supersede, how is it justified and how it can supersede the rights to information in the first place. Moving on, why history textbooks? The status quo that students are not just compulsory to take history, but they're also compulsory to take examinations for the subject history in their SPM and their everyday and their main examinations. So what does this do? We tell you that it shapes a good stereotypical perspective of your country in these particular students. And when they ask question, why history? We tell you because you take pride from your past and where you originate. For example, when you are in Malaysia, you practically boast how you actually got your independence without bloodshed. You practically boast about how you can actually unite three main different races. But then again, if you're talking about individual, you can see this in your everyday life. When you say, hey, I'm Arabic, I'm mixed, I'm royal, whatsoever, we can see that everyone takes pride from where they originate and where they come from. Therefore, history plays a big role in an individual's life. But so what kind of tensions in the first place? We tell these are just clashes of ideologies. For example, we can see when the Western countries actually view Tok Janggut as a terrorist, while Malaysians actually view him as a national hero. No, but even if, in the worst case scenarios, when this isn't just a clash of ideologies, we tell you it's not mutually exclusive to just history textbooks. This can occur because of other different ideologies, because they differ all the time. For example, Malaysia can think that a dance belongs to Malaysia, while someone else can think the dance belongs to them, or whatsoever. And this, we tell you, is because of this, tensions that can occur between countries is not mutually exclusive towards history textbooks, the alteration of history textbooks. Therefore, we should not blame history textbooks for these tensions. But any one of you?
But we think that opinions should never be predicated in textbooks. It should solely be based upon facts.
If they do their research. And second, I will later tell you in my second point on why the importance of nationalism. Sit down. So, ladies and gentlemen, before that, let's look at the word nationalism. What is it? We tell you it's love towards your country as an individual. So, in other words, you can also refer to it as patriotism. So what's the beneficial of having nationalism in the first place? We tell you that let's take a flashback to the past when we fought for independence. sorry, it acts as a glue to unite us together, to fight for independence together. But even then, you look at in status quo, we tell that it's still important to maintain the harmonious country we have here. We can say there's no segregation between, there's almost no segregation between us. We literally mix with each other. You can be an Indian and you can still eat with a Malay guy, for example. And we see that some countries, like US, the United States, for example, this segregation still happens. We tell you it also curbs brain drain. We can already see this when the country tries, when the country actually have national service, for example, and we tell you that altering the history textbooks is an expansion of that particular policy, because we tell you that brain drain also occurs when these people don't have the love towards their country. They think other countries are better and they fly off, and this hurts the economy. It hurts the country as a whole. So we tell you, of course, it won't solve brain drain, but it will help to decrease it in a way, because then it will morally bond these students with the country, knowing that now they love their country and they want their country to improve. So not just that, then you ask the question, why is it then government's responsibility? We tell the harms of not having it proves that it is the government's responsibility to alter in the first place. But before that, yes.
Now, prove to us how false information could actually promote true nationalism to
We always stated before that history actually shapes and actually, it shapes a good stereotypical perspective of your country towards yourself. For example, if you read, if you say that your country, example, fought nicely whatsoever, it creates a typical type that your country fought for it or whatsoever. We tell that this actually creates a perspective of your country, making you love your country even more. So then, moving on to what are the harms. We tell that this country would be in a chaotic state. Why? Let's look at all the crimes that can occur if we didn't have I'm so sorry. Let's look at what will happen if our nationalism isn't that strong. We tell you that especially in countries which have multiple races, not just three, we have different races all over, and we tell because of these different beliefs, if you don't stand for one reason, if you don't stand for one main thing, that you will be not just divided, but we tell you that a government has to promote its own country, not to label it as a bad country. That's practically we see this in everyday life when your country, for example, promotes your government promotes you to other people, and then they try. Of course, what kind of government would promote their own country as something bad? Because not only does this helps the image of the country, also helps the people to actually love their country more. For all these reasons above, ladies and gentlemen, we tell that altering it, lying about something isn't necessarily bad for a good cause. If it's for a good cause and it doesn't take away your rights, then what's the harm? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Prime Minister. Let's have the opposition. Here.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, sir, here's what government tried to do in today's debate, right? They tried to prove to us how patriotism is always going to be upheld, and it's only going to be upheld under their paradigm. We think patriotism is never mutually exclusive to their case, but more importantly, this debate should revolve around where is patriotism more effective. And under that token, we're going to prove to you how this motion brings more harms than good, and also we're going to prove to you how patriotism is held better under our paradigm, right? So let's move on to the rebuttals towards their case. Firstly, the first assertion that she put into her speech was that the students are actually going to find out the information, the truth at the end of the day, right? But what exactly happens to the idea of patriotism then? Thinking that the government was such good, the country was such a good country that actually fought the colonization of the British and things like that. We think that is exactly what gives them a false sense of hope, a false sense of interest towards the country, we think that this is actually going to resort to retaliation by society in the first place, and therefore tarnishing the idea of a respectable government and a respectable country in the first place, right? Secondly, she told us how opinions are always integrated in our textbooks, right? How some people perceive Tok Janggut to become a terrorist, and some people perceive him to become a hero. We think that opinions should never be integrated in textbooks because that only creates a stereotype of what things should look like, right? We think textbooks are more often than not based on facts, so that there is room for discourse, there is room for discussion to understand these kind of things. There's a trade of opinions and not really subjected to one one train of thinking of thought, right? We think that that's never fair. But more importantly, she brought to us an argument, and she wants to tell us that it's going to help. You don't really need to manipulate the textbooks to actually achieve racial integration. But more importantly, even if you had to do that, right, that means there is a form of lying to tell people that you need to get back, you need to have this racial integration because in your past this has happened, right? That actually shows to you that there is racial conflict in the country, therefore antagonizing the problem to begin with. We think that that's extremely harmful, and it's going to put them, or it's going to turn back on them and into creating a more chaotic country to begin with, right? So we see that's done with the case, how it's already fought. Let's move on to our case, right? And I'm going to make you one argument under how it's going to be morally unjustified, and this is going to be predicated upon two levels of analysis. Firstly, on the idea of government manipulation. Secondly, on the false sense of respect. Before I move on, go on.
True, it's not mutually exclusive, but the impact is huge as every citizen will be exposed to it.
What are you talking about? Let's move on to my case, right? Wasted POI. Let's take a look at what children read. It can be easily influenced, especially when you have something as interactive as a textbook that they're forced to learn, that they're forced to memorize, right? What exactly happens then? We think that children now actually get the idea that government is actually setting a stereotype for children to believe on what really happens in the world, what really happened then, right? We take example of Malaysia itself, right? How we always perceive Malaysians to be the ones who fought for independence without conceding to the fact, or without really understanding that the people who colonized our country actually wanted to leave. We think that these are the kinds of things that we completely neglect, even if there is a possibility of this, right? Due to the fact that people actually, or the message that's been sent to us in our textbooks actually tell us that Malaysia is the one who fought for independence, regardless of all other external factors. We think that what exactly happens then is you create automatic perception for these students to actually understand what really happened, right? But why is this in comparison to when history is never manipulated? What exactly happens then? We think now children or students actually hold form of patriotic values, and if that should be upheld, we think that that actually serves a better form of patriotism, because you know what you're fighting for and you know what exactly happened, and regardless of all of that, you still think that it's a moral value that you should uphold and it's something that you should prioritize, right? We think that exactly eliminates the idea of a false sense of patriotism. We think that's extremely important. Go on, Ben.
So, altering history textbooks medium for huge influence, whereby you instill moral values on what Malaysia has done good, right? So now are you saying that this moral or positive value instilled in history textbook is not good or not beneficial at all?
So we're not saying it's not good or beneficial, we're saying it won't work. We think that it's beneficial, yes, because if it's predicated upon the truth on what really happened, because that's something that can be proven, right? If it's something that you completely manipulate, it could generally be an assumption that the government wants to take. It could be something that they feel is completely right. We think that that's never fair, because they're taking a stand to when it is true and it is right? So we think that their case falls to begin with, and even worse from that POI. So let's move on to the second level of analysis, where we talk about the false sense of respect and the idea of how people actually idolize the country, how people idolize the people who've actually fought for our country in the idea of colonization and things like that, right? What exactly happens then? We think that people often have the ideology that these people should be respected, these people should be put on top of everyone else, and we think that the idea of patriotism to that aspect, when they think that they want to contribute to the country as much as these leaders have done, we think that what exactly happens now when they actually understand or find out that these people haven't done as much as they said they would, right? We think that what exactly happens then? You're actually tarnishing the idea of respect and the idea that you should uphold these kind of moral values under your paradigm, because they acceded to the fact that this kind of information is going to be leaked at the end of the day. We think that that's extremely harmful. Sit down, Ben. I already took one. So we think that the false sense of respect actually creates a form of, because you're blocking any idea for discourse, you're blocking the whole leeway for people to actually share their opinions on these leaders and actually have a train of thought in different directions, right? We think you're creating a narrow-minded society in towards that extent. We think you're creating an unholistic idea of education to begin with. We think that's extremely harmful. So let's take a look at what I told you in today's debate, right? We told you, first of all, how it's morally unjustified to the extent where government is actually manipulating people, where they don't have the capability to think now because their thoughts are being manipulated into the stereotype the government has set. Secondly, I talked to you about the false sense of respect and how that's extremely harmful towards these individuals itself. More importantly, we told you how patriotism is better upheld under our paradigm. We've also proved to you our burden, in which this motion only brings more harms than good. For all those reasons and more, side opposition takes today's debate.
Right. Thank you. That's the next Deputy Prime Minister.
It is very shameful coming from side opposition, assuming that children are all stupid in the first place, while we tell you that on government to make in the first place, right? First of all, the very essence of history itself and why we use this as a medium to promote patriotism. Because first of all, it starts discourse within the people who learn this in the first place. Second of all, we tell you that there is no right or wrong when it comes to history. It is all based on perspective. This is why we tell you when we alter history, we tell you that it's not changing the whole history itself. It is actually altering the perspective to make it sound nice to your own country, to make your country sound nice inside these history textbooks, right? Because what they came up and said, assumed that we ran our case on, was first of all, that we will alter the whole history itself and manipulate these people and to change their minds to believe in something that was not true in the first place. We say that this is very shameful because first of all, they came up here and gave you the assumption that children are stupid and are in an insecure mental state that can only absorb this information. We tell you no. We go and search for these kinds of information if they want to. And then it was very contradictory from their side to say that these people are going to have discourse in the first place if we give them the true facts. We tell you no, discourse will happen within our paradigm because we tell you we give them a perspective that either they can agree or disagree with, which is more effective in promoting patriotism because we tell you of our perspective, it is now up to you to choose whether you want to agree or disagree. Because when you go with the opposition's paradigm, where you only give you hard facts, people would not think it as something that is interesting, and they would not want to learn in the first place. Because why history textbook itself stimulates discourse is because there's a certain perspective that people can either agree or disagree with. And when it comes to this, it further promotes nationalism. Why? Because on the first level, we tell you that it promotes nationalism when these people have a chance to know the perspective of the nation, perspective that the nation has put out to that the government has put out to the nation in the form of history textbooks. They are more likely to agree because why? We tell you that education is something that is very important and the huge impact that history textbooks have on the nation in the first place, right? Not yet, because first of all, history textbooks play a huge role within our society today because it is compulsory for all students to take up the subject, to learn this subject. This is why we believe that we will change this perspective of history to benefit our own society. Because we see in status quo today that that all countries are altering history to give the perspective of the nation, to let these people think and believe that that what the nation did was right, that believes in the nation's choice to choose what is best for the people in the first place, right? Before I move on, yes, either one of you.
Do the Malaysian students hate our country?
We tell you that these children grow up being innocent, right? Because when they look at this nation, what they're doing for them, they trust the nation when they trust the government to govern them as a nation. This is why we tell you that history, when they trust the government, they are more susceptible to these ideas, right? These positive perspectives of what the nation has done to, first of all, achieve independence, to help the nation in the first place. This is why it promotes nationalism, because they trust the government to give them the right perspective. And this is why we say that their case falls, because first of all, retaliation will not occur. We already told you within our paradigm, if you want to do extra research outside of your curriculum, then go ahead. We tell you that we're only giving you our side of the story, our perspective towards that certain incident in history, and it is up to you whether you want to agree with it or not. And we tell you that true discourse actually happens within our paradigm, because that is when there comes a clash of perspectives. Instead of giving them perspectives in the first place, right? When, for example, let me give you a case of history, and we give you a perspective. Is it more easier for you to analyze perspective, whether you agree to it or not, instead of looking at the facts and thinking what is right or wrong? Because facts, the essence of facts itself is not to spark opinions. We believe that this is more problematic on their side, because when they give them hard-on facts to memorize, where they are forced to learn these kind of things, we tell you that it's more problematic towards their society, because these people will only be based on these sole facts, instead of being able to cause discourse within them, discussion between what they think is right or wrong. But before I move on to the 6 minute, yes.
Do you uphold the same patriotic value when you manipulate history in comparison to when history is not manipulated?
We tell you that history is not. We tell you that history is not manipulated within our paradigm. We tell you that we're altering history to serve to in order to achieve that certain goal within history. We tell you that patriotism is more effective within our paradigm, because first of all, we give them the nation's perspective, what they should think collectively as a nation, what we believe in together, right? Because when these people think of the same ideologies, of the same perspective towards that certain idea in history, this will cause them to be more united, because they're united by the same ideas. Then we also tell you that first, why is it justified to alter history for nationalism? It is justified because the nation is the one giving these people the information. The people trust the nation to be able to give them these information, right? If we give them this, we tell you that history has no right or wrong. It is just a matter of perspective. If we give the nation's perspective towards this, the people will be united by a force of collective thought. Because where these people are more susceptible to be able to go out there and fight for their nation, and to be able to stand up for their nation in times of trials, right? And we tell you that we prove to you that this altered history can serve nationalism, because it overweighs the benefits of what the country has done to achieve that certain goal within history. Why is this so? Because we tell you that when we give them a room for discourse, whether they want to agree with what the history textbooks teach them or not, we tell you that rights are never universal, especially when it comes to serving nationalism. We extend your rights because we want to protect you. Why nationalism is, if you believe that the nation has a right to teach you to think between what's right or wrong, the nation wants to teach you to agree or disagree with a certain perspective, then go with side.
People of the internet, if you're really clueless about what's happening in this debate, then don't blame us, blame side government, because until the second speaker, he's just repeating same thing that came from the Prime Minister, right? Now, the side government took a very huge burden because they wanted to promote unity and also they wanted to uphold nationalism in our students. And the third burden that they want to take was they want to decrease brain drain in the country. But even in the second speaker, they never proved to us how it will promote unity and how it will decrease brain drain, right? I don't think so. Now, few rebuttals that would starting the second speaker, because what she said is it's all based on it's all based on perspective on the history that they're just altering perspective and making it sound. And we don't think if every student has the same perspective, we don't think this course can truly happen, right? Even if you give them the way for them to research more and more, but we think that textbook is the main. That students mainly depend on textbooks much, right? We don't believe that students have the tendency to even research more. If their perspective is all of them have the same perspective, we don't think that discourse can really happen. If all of them think of the same way and there's no proper discourse, there's no clashes of ideology that can really happen, that could really shape the minds of our society. No, thank you. And also the second idea that she told to us is, at the end of the day, it's already up to you for you to judge this kind of history. And what they're doing is they're not making anything, they're making no change, because at the end of the day, it's all up to the students how they perceive this kind of information. Then they're not really upholding nationalism. If I still learn from my textbook and I have a different perspective on what really happened on my history, because at the end of the proof to us. And the second idea, I give them POI saying that do the students hate our country? And she said yes, no, and she said no, that students do love our country, right? If you say so, then where is the urgency for you to uphold this kind of proposal, right? There's no reason for you to uphold nationalism if there's no problem in our country of nationalism. We don't think so, and their proposal just putting fuel to fire, right? You only be exacerbating the problem that never really existed in the first place. Now, the second speaker. Now, move on to first speaker, for the Prime Minister. She wanted us to take pride to things that to our country, but how can you take pride towards things that you are manipulated, that you're taking pride towards things that never really existed, because you're just looking at it from a different perspective that you're just small-minded. How can you take pride in those kind of things, right? And also on the idea of brain drain, if the students realize that they are being manipulated by the government, we don't think that nationalism can really uphold it, and therefore government, because they are being manipulated by their own textbooks, right? We think it exacerbates brain drain even more. No, thank you. And the last idea, she told us that history shapes your identity, but we don't think it's morally justified, because your identity isn't really of what you are, right? Because you're being manipulated by your textbook, so it's not really upholding your identity. You're just upholding something that doesn't really exist in the first place. We don't think that's more. We don't think it's justified. For the NPRs.
Yes. We are integrating this perspective into the students, but this perspective that we're integrating has to be moral values. Are you then saying this perspective that we're integrating into, we're forcing them to have the moral values back?
We're not saying that having good moral values back in this kind of thing, but we don't think this proposal is really it's really that good for you to promote nationalism. We don't think this is a proper proposal for you to uphold nationalism and promote unity, just like what you wanted, right? Now, not right, but let's want to start the two arguments today, which is my first argument, which we believe that it harms rights towards information, even though they're students, right? This textbook is the main source for students to gain information and education, and that kind of dependency that happens is as a result of the student acts as the main role of the lifestyle that determines the lifestyle of the students. Students are gaining most of the information from that textbook. But we think it's unjustified for government to manipulate the biggest source of information for the students, right? We don't think it's justified. No, thank you. That students should have the rights towards true information that they need to learn. We think that if you want to promote discourse and you want to promote nationalism, we don't think that you should be based on one perspective. We think that textbooks should be more neutral based on what history is like. Yeah. Because we believe that students have right to true information, that students have right to not to be lied to not to be manipulated. Students, even though the students are also our society, and society should have And they're undermining our students and characterizing our students as criminals to our nationalism, and therefore saying that our students can't unite, even though there's no really proper problem that they never really clarified to from the get-go, right? There's no urgency to this problem because they're just labeling students of they're just labeling our youth as people who cannot unite, and people who hate other races just because they're young, just when they're in school, right? Yes.
So the reason why there are no problems in the first place is because we're taking actions to maintain the nationalism in the first place. What are you going to do to maintain the nationalism? Melting your government? We don't think so.
We're not doing anything because there's no really problem that's really happening, right? That people do learn from what happens in history, but until now there's still no problem within our with our unity, right? Then there's no really that form of urgency, that form of need for this kind of proposal. We don't need to maintain it because there's no it's not really exacerbating our status quo, right? Second argument. Best for your society. But that kind of principle doesn't apply to manipulating the minds of our society, because students are also our society, right? We think that societal perception and student perception towards government will be lost, right? That students will lose trust in government because what they're doing, the government is upholding a deception. They're deceiving our students and therefore breaking that trust from our students and losing their support from our youth, right? We don't think it's really good for our nationalism. And therefore, what really happens within their proposal, they're not really upholding nationalism. What they're doing is that they're just exacerbating nationalism. They're just making it worse, right? They're not really changing it. Because at the end of the day, it's never really okay for you to manipulate the minds of our society. It's never okay for you to lie to our youth, at a national level, deceive our students. We don't think it's ever justified, and we also don't think it's morally justified. Right?
Thank you, indeed, of opposition. Let's
Yes, because what you've heard just now from the opposition side was the speech. Unfortunately, does not live up to that standard, and we'll show you why KYS is much more better. Because there are three issues in today's debate. First issue is the issue of visibility. The second issue is the issue of whether it benefits or and the harms of that. And the second issue is the issue of the right of information. Before that, let me look at the greatest burden that they tried to push on it, and it's the most hugest issue in today's debate, which is the issue of visibility. Because this is what this is what almost every speaker brought up and they said. This is what Anik said. I said, hey, look, we are forcing them to believe in a perspective, we're forcing them to believe in a certain perspective, manipulating the way they think, in altering history textbooks, right? I have few responses to that. Number one, we don't force anyone to believe anything to begin with, but the textbook is an inferential threshold to manipulating something of a good choice. For example, there are tons of stuff that we still don't know. This kind of stuff that we still don't know that's happening now. Believe something that's nice about your country, because you have to understand one thing, that there are still immoral acts that is done by your country, and therefore this actually curves and changes the perspective of your country, building a good perspective to your country. But thirdly, even if they were forced to believe in something, right? Even if they were forced to believe in a good perspective, this essentially means that the moral values are already integrated in them, and they already understand the moral values is given to them. But secondly, they told us that, look, we have better alternatives in actually trying to impose or trying to implement nationalism to begin with. But there was no analysis on what are the other alternatives in status quo. They have never given to us this analysis, and I believe that's why our alternative still stands, right? Secondly, thirdly, they say that this is not efficient, right? This will never be efficient in a way because this will never be efficient because they have their alternative, which we never talked about, right? Firstly, we believe that yes, we accept the fact that there are many types of way, but introduce of nationalism to begin with, right? We're not trying to completely change the perspective of these people. Yes, they have the different opinions and can choose which they want, but this is trying to increase the percentage of nationalism, because you have to understand that history textbooks, as what my prime minister said, is that history is compulsory in every school, and you learn history to begin with, right? You know that you know about the Communist Party, and you know about stuff that happens in the history textbook, and you actually apply them in your life, and you learn from that, right? But secondly, on the second issue on whether it gives benefits or harm, and this was the argument that they ran on retaliation. Before that, yes.
But the definition of history means what happened in the past. Do you think it should be called a history textbook, or should it be called the government's opinion on history textbook?
Yes, it should be called the government's opinion on history textbook, because we're instilling good moral values. You don't, okay, when you when you impose when you give the real facts to the people, right? Oh no, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm talking actually found out the truth, right? I have 4 responses to this. Number 1, we are given a choice of opinions, and textbooks represents a great influence for our social choice. Meaning that it's just like smoking advertisements. We tell you that smoking is bad, right? We're trying to input this kind of mentality that this stuff is wrong, right? But in history textbooks, we try to input this mentality that the country of Malaysia is actually doing something good, and believe that this is a social choice, right? But secondly, we're trying to impose or implement the proposal to completely, we're not trying to completely change the perspective, but it's just a medium for further integrating moral values, right? But thirdly, even if there is a retaliation that is, even there's a retaliation, number 1, it's not mutually exclusive, right? Because there's a lot of retaliations in the world. There's also retaliation because of religion, because other things, and we believe that retaliation because of history textbooks is just a basket case, right? But secondly, also this is not similar to the NSA case, because this information does the harm principle is just a changing of opinions, right? It's just like integrating subliminal messages if you want them to learn something new. I've already told about how the benefits of this benefits of this, because it creates a more harmonious country, what my Prime Minister, Deputy Minister said, and also it curbs brain drain, right? But secondly, they say that no, look, there is no problem in today's debate. There's no problem to begin with. The only reason there's no problem is because this policy is already implemented, right? That every history textbook is already altered to begin with. Almost every country in the world is status quo today. Alter the history textbooks, right? Alter the history textbooks, make them think of perspective, and that's why there's no problem nationalistic today. If you were to go with your proposal, and if you were to change status quo as it is right now, right? You cross this huge chaos, right? Because there's no analysis down, there's no analysis on what happens if we actually change, back history textbooks to the real facts. There's no analysis given on that by opposition, and I'll tell you, if problem, which is not my one. This means sits down. Okay, on the third issue of the right to information, right? They said, look, they deserve the truth of rights, right? Every human being here has roots of rights, and the government must have the responsibility of making sure that these people know what's right, know what's wrong, right? Okay, full responses to this. Yes, we believe that rights is never absolute, and rights is never universal, right? This right might be a priority, this right might not be a priority. We believe that it's all equal to begin with. But secondly, but government at the point has a right to extend their right to the people, because it has a utilitarian benefit to the people. It's a utilitarian benefit for the greater good, because governments are paternalistic. They act on what they believe is best for the people, and believe that altering history textbook, instilling moral values in these students is the best way to go with it, right? Because it's integrating moral values, which is good. Right, on these people, right? But fourthly, also moving on to the same burden, which has not engaged with us, right? On on the idea that these students can agree or disagree. We're throwing the cards on the table for them to choose which opinion you think is best. Because I parallel this to smoking, where they saying where smoking is where advertisement smoking is bad, when advertisement where actually smoking is bad or good, right? It influences your social choice, but it's at the end of the day, it's up to you to choose, because that's our stance today, and we want to actually increase or protect nationalism as much as we can, but not completely, right? Okay, I've been in this room for 2 times now, and I believe that after this, I'll be in this room for the 3rd time. Thank you.
Alright, okay, that's
How contradictory, Mr. Chair. Promoting good values through a immoral medium in the first place. Promoting good values through showing that, I quote the Prime Minister, she said, lying for a good cause. In the first place, lying is never a moral act in the first place. And secondly, promoting good values through an immoral act, we don't think there is any motive to that. And we don't think even if they had a motive, it would actually work under their paradigm. Let us move on to a few issues of this debate. I have classified this debate into 2 issues. So firstly, the issue of value of nationalism that they tried to promote and which was their stance in the first place. And secondly, about the issue of societal perception or interpretation. Let us move on to the first issue of this debate. First of all, they tried to tell you, and they took the stance of protecting nationalism. The fact that they actually agreed to the fact that they are able to research on their own, history textbooks, is not really protecting nationalism, is it? Because you are really allowing them to actually research on the truth in the first place. So we don't see how these people will ultimately believe in what the government believes in the first place. Because Ben has considered the fact that these history books should change their title to Government's Opinions on History. So therefore we believe that these people has been proven to actually are not actually going to be promoted. Nationalism is not actually going to be promoted, because they are given the freedom in the first place, the freedom to choose whatever is right or what is wrong. If they wanted to prove that nationalism is actually protected under their paradigm, then don't allow them to do research at all, because what they ultimately want at the end of the day is to promote nationalism at its best. So therefore we don't think the government should actually let the students actually research on their own, because now the students now will only believe what the government sends to them. But the fact that they give freedom, this motive won't be upheld under their paradigm. No, thank you. Secondly, on the idea of this motive in the first place, and secondly, I asked from the earliest debate, we asked this question: how can false information actually promote true nationalism in the first place? We told you, and we told you and asked them time and time again, but they didn't prove to you how this false information could actually promote the best value of nationalism, because we believe nationalism should come out or develop in the first place. If you subliminally message them in order to go with the government, so we believe the government is actually utilizing a method where you subliminally message, and is setting a precedence on achieving things or government's motive through subliminal messaging. It's not really allowing them or educating them to actually promote or embrace the value of nationalism, but it's really embracing the value of what the government thinks of history. The fact that they try to tell you is not actually altering the facts of history and thus making them sound nice. It's equivalent to the fact that they are actually lying to the people in the first place. Because if the country lying to the people, showing that the government is actually good and that they already puts a false sense of security towards these people and will never promote a form of nationalism. Yes, sir.
Yes, lying is bad and subliminal messaging may be immoral, but this is doing something bad to achieve a greater good. So answer me this: why in the world is this utility benefit harmful regardless of the method?
First of all, okay, fine. The method, okay, fine. We'll go through even if it does work, right? Even if nationalism is actually upheld under their paradigm, is this value of nationalism is actually the one the government wants to promote in the first place? Is this value of nationalism is actually truthful? Because we believe the value of nationalism that is being upheld is predicated upon lies upon the government. We don't think that is true nationalism in the first place. We do believe, to a certain extent, nationalism could actually be proved, could actually be upheld under their case. But the fact that nationalism that they are actually trying to promote is not really nationalism, because it's actually the love towards a fake idea in the first place. Because they believe the government, they believe the country is already good. Allow these people to actually improve the country, because they know that this country are already good from history and now in the first place. And secondly, on the idea of how they actually force them to believe in the first place. The fact that they actually said that they are more likely to believe in this history textbooks rather than their own research. So therefore it shows how they are actually considering to the fact there are no room for discourse in the first place. Because room for discourse allows you actually to agree or disagree in the first place. The fact that they want to agree, they want the students to actually agree to one side of the proposal, they want these people or these students to actually agree to what the government believes in. So therefore we don't believe that they are actually creating the one that is promoting a room for discourse. Yes, Manly.
When you give people hard-on facts where there's no avenue for discussion or discourse, how is that then in promoting nationalism?
We believe even if discourse were to happen under their paradigm, we believe the discourse that happens in our paradigm is far better. The fact is, they are, even if they do discourse, even if they do their discourse, the information that they are trying to stand on is only based on false information, and it's not really based on their true interpretation. Because even if they do discourse, it's not really based on their true will or their true interpretation of the information. Because the information that they have gained from the government or from the textbooks is only government's opinions and not really what actually happened. Because history is all about what happened, and what they're trying to do is only manipulating that into achieving the government's motive. We don't see how that could actually promote the value of nationalism in the first place. If they wanted to prove the value of nationalism, then prove to us how false information could actually promote this true value of nationalism. Because if you do want to promote nationalism, prove to us how this nationalism that has been embedded in the students' minds in the first place is actually effective for the students' life later on. But they didn't prove that in the first place. Second issue of today's debate about societal perception. They try to tell you on the idea. Of how it curbs brain drain. We don't think how it actually curbs brain drain in the first place. They try to tell you on the idea of what are the students believing in the end of the day. Giving freedom for them to actually research on the truth at the end of the day doesn't really solve the problem of cap slashing of ideologies in the first place. The fact that they have to study, and the fact that they have to go through exams, and they have to believe in what the government has actually said to them in textbooks, and then again they added research on the truth that has actually happened. We don't think how these clashes of ideologies could actually be solved under their paradigm. We think the chaotic country that they try to solve would be far exacerbated under their paradigm, because these clashes of ideologies is clearly exacerbated in the first place. We don't see the value of this information is actually useful at the end of the day. So therefore, the government, with their stance from the start, we believe they have failed from the start of the debate. What have the opposition told you in contrary? We told you on the idea how it actually promotes this, this allows the room for discourse. We already told you how it harms the role of government, and we already told you, and we flipped the point.
So, Subir, let's start your presentation.
Those who fail to remember history are condemned to repeat it. Sejarah textbook Form 1. Let's take a look at the issues in today's debate that has really been a problem, right? The few questions that government needed to answer from the get-go of today's debate. Firstly, where do you draw the line as to where the government can really subliminally manipulate the idea of societal perception, right? We think this question needs to be answered because we told you how it's morally unjustified when the government actually goes in there and changes your mindset for you when you actually highlight a utopian history was perfect, and we think your idea of patriotism is highlighted then without any discourse, right? Secondly, is it okay for government to instill a false sense of patriotism to that extent, right? We think it's not, because we tell you that if you want the idea of patriotism for it to be fully effective, we told you that you need to be in a form of self-determination to what exactly patriotic values are, right? That's exactly what we do under our paradigm, where it's better upheld and it's completely tarnished under theirs. But thirdly, and one of the biggest issues here, right, the idea of discourse, in where discourse is better, right? We think that under our paradigm, right, when you set a utopian world, under their paradigm, when you set a utopian history where everything was perfect and things like that, we think there's no idea for discourse now, as we said before and time again, because of this manipulation that government has when they actually set a stereotype as to what really happened and what you should believe, right? Because when they tell you, when they base it on opinions, when the government tells you that what happened, the idea of discourse of opinions, not really discourse on history, but discourse on the patriotic values that exist, right? Because that's what they've been harping about. They've been really arguing that the discourse on history is better upheld under their paradigm. Yes, we're saying that's true, but discourse should never be on history. Discourse should be on the values that history holds. That's exactly what we're trying to uphold under our paradigm, right? Because under their paradigm, they've been arguing how if we give government's opinion, now people can have discourse on what history was really like then. We think that's never important. That defeats the whole idea of history to begin with. We think that that's exactly what we shouldn't uphold to that extent. We think they fail there. And better still, they talk to us about the idea of racial integration, which has been repeated by two speakers on their side, right? They talk about how racial integration is better. So let's take a comparison as to who actually provides better racial integration, right? Under our paradigm, we concede to the fact that there has been racial conflicts in the past and we have catered to it. Of a racial conflict is never happened, in which it's better than or more likely for this history to repeat itself, right? We think that's exactly what they're pushing under their paradigm. We don't think that's ever fair. But more importantly, now with the clash points of today's debate, let's take a look at the burden that they tried to bring into this debate, right? They told us how they want to uphold nationalism to the greatest extent. With that, they told us how they're going to help racial integration. Rebutted. Second, they talk about how it's going to help curb brain drain. We think it's completely far-fetched, not even relevant to the debate, because we don't see how brain drain will actually occur in a situation where you manipulate history as itself. When you actually control what society understands, we think that's never going to help. Second, thirdly, they told us how it's going to, the second speaker repeated the argument on racial integration on a different level, but still been rebutted. So we think their case falls, and they never really fulfill their burden to that extent. But what have we told you in today's debate, right? We told you wanted to prove to you how this motion only brings more harm than good. With that, we told you how it's morally for society itself. We don't think that's fair. Secondly, we told how it's going to harm the rights of information, to what students really need to learn in order to achieve a more holistic form education. We think that's harm there. Thirdly, we told you how societal perception towards the government has become extremely tarnished now when they find out that the government has been lying to them all this while. We think for all those reasons and more, side opposition takes this debate.
Let's have the man for this debate.
That history textbooks can have on children in the first place. This is why we say that in our paradigm, we will achieve better nationalism, because we're all for nationalism, because they failed to prove to us what was their stance, right? So in this debate, the stance turned out to be who achieves better nationalism at the end of the day, and we will prove to you how our side achieves it better. First of all, first clash, where will discourse happen? Is it opposition's paradigm or is it in government paradigm? We tell you that within our paradigm, we've already proven to you how discourse would actually happen when this nation gives their perspective and whether these children have the right to believe whether it is right or wrong. Rather than their case, where they say they gave you hard-on facts, where there is no room for discourse, where there is no room on discussion, and we tell you that there is discourse on perspectives on what happens in history in the first place, because there is no right or wrong when it comes to history. At the end of the day, it boils down to perspective, and that is what we're trying to uphold. This is where discourse happens. This is where we uphold national. still allow these people to either agree or disagree with these perspectives in the first place, right? When this happens, when this occurs, this will actually allow these people to have to encourage these people to think more, to think critically about what information that's given to them. And this is why we believe that people will actually appreciate the government more, and this is why nationalism will occur. Because we told you from the very get-go that nationalism will occur within this paradigm, because the people will trust the government, that encourages them to think, that gives them an avenue to agree or disagree with the perspectives that they have already given to down. Third of all, the benefits versus harms, right? What they kept on harping about in their whole case was about the harms of this, but they never proven to us how they're going to solve the problem of nationalism within their paradigm in the first place, because they only told you that there are other alternatives, but never told you what they were, and they never proved to you how they would solve the problem. We tell you that in our case, we bring about to you more benefits, and we first of all, when discourse happens, when these people are united together by a belief that the government has already given unto them, this will cause them to unite together with the same thoughts, and this is how we achieve nationalism. Third of all, who achieves better nationalism at the end of the day? Because this is what the debate really is about, right? We've already proven to you that how our alternative is going to solve it, how we're actually taking a step to maintain the nationalism that we have within our society today. Well, they kept on saying that there are other alternatives, but never proven to us how they're going to achieve it, what are the alternatives that they're going to use, and their whole case kept on revolving around the issue of how much harms it brings about to society, but never really solving the main crux, the main issue of this debate, right? And the whole case coming from side opposition only relied on these three assumptions. First of all, that children are stupid. Second of all, that children are going to magically turn smart when you turn history textbook into facts. And then how are they? And we tell you that we to either agree or disagree with it. We believe that this further encourages these people to go towards nationalism, because we are united by the same ideologies, and this is when this discourse is actually going to happen within our paradigm, instead of their paradigm, where they fail to prove to us how discourse is going to happen in the first place, when you're only given hard-on facts, but you're never given the perspective on how you're going to change your thoughts. Next, even if you undervalue the nationalism that we have achieved, we achieved something that lasted for decades. Unlike side opposition, who only assumes that they can do the same without telling us how in the first place. So the whole issue today boils down to who achieves better nationalism. And we tell you that government side has achieved this burden.
Right, thank you, Dr. Sai, and both teams. The next debate, we'd like both teams to cross the floor, shake hands.